American Vampire panel. Our guests, as they walk in, Scott Snyder, Rafael Albuquerque. I'm Dante. I write for Geek with Mac, and this, yet again, I'm repeating myself. I don't be nervous. Here's a couple questions I have, and after we're done with my questions, people just line up by the podium there, and we will answer your questions as quick as we can, okay? All right. First off, I'm going to ask you, Scott. Skinner Sweet is a real jerk in the series, kind of a sociopath from what's expected in the series since he was, introduced. How fun was it writing him?
Oh, I love writing bad characters. Let me start by saying thank you to you guys. We threw this together pretty late. I emailed Eric and the people that organized the con and said, I've got nothing on Sunday if you want to do another panel. And so they were like, let's do an American Vampire one. So the fact that all you guys showed up really means a lot. I appreciate it. American Vampire for me is kind of like home. So out of all the things I do, it's my favorite series to work on. They're all children and I love them all. I love Batman and everything, but American Vampire is where it's always a relief when I go back to it. I can put in any crazy thing that Rafael and I like about music or history or folklore or anything like that. So it blends all of these crazy genres that I just enjoy so much. Skinner, to me, Skinner and Pearl are the heart of the series. Other characters have taken on a lot of weight, like Felicia and Calvin, thanks. And Bixby now, and a bunch of other characters, but they're sort of the twin pillars of the series. Pearl is someone who I think, they represent almost twin sort of tenets, I think, of American sort of psychology in the 20th century, and I love them both dearly, whereas Skinner sort of feels like, no matter, he's sort of the thing that you put him in a box and he'll just do anything he can to get out of it, no matter what, and he's just lived his life fighting against any kind of restriction in the craziest, darkest ways possible. But the story is largely about sort of, it's almost a reverse Breaking Bad, where he has less and less to rage against, or the things that he's raging against become bigger and bigger and bigger, where it's not just sort of closing the frontier and civilization, it's, well, there's no stopping it anymore, now you're in a city, well, crime, well, the police, well, and things, there's just always another layer to fight against, and I think he gets more and more frustrated. And the point that we're at right now, which I really love, like we're starting, I just sent him the story for our anthology, the 8-pager, which I'm really excited about. It sets up the next arc. He's, if you've read the last book, I don't want to spoil everything for everybody, but if you've read our last volume, he underwent a really big change. Yeah, it's the one after that actually. He underwent like a really big change. And he's very lost right now. He's not used to being human and being, weak and vulnerable. So he's at an incredibly interesting point to write, and I love writing him. He makes a quick appearance in this short story too. It's at the very end. It's almost like after the closing credits of the anthology. There's a quick 2-page story that shows where he is.
Very cool. And this is the second question, and this is for Rafael. The look of the book from the first issue to currently has had this truly gorgeous yet eerie style. And how long did you work on the character designs before everyone involved were happy with them? Like, how long did it take to characters, art?
It doesn't really take much, because the thing is that every time I have a new character, thank you. Every time I have a new character, Scott and I, we talk about what is he about, what is his motivations and everything. So based on that, I try to design something. I go through him, we go through the editor, but usually it doesn't really take long. I mean, it doesn't have like back and forth. It's just quick.
Well, that's the thing. Like, so when we started American Vampire, Mark Doyle and Will Dennis, who were Vertigo, were like, we're gonna try out a bunch of different artists, for it. Stephen King was on it. It was kind of a big deal at that time for Vertigo, so they wanted to do this kind of audition thing. And the first person that I saw was Rafael, and you had done those sketches that are in the back of the first volume of Pearl and Skinner, and we didn't look at anybody else. It was like, that's it. Rafa has it, because he's such an emotive artist. What I love about his style so much is it's super kinetic and has all of this bombast, all this action he can do. It always looks like it's moving. And yet it's the emotional scenes that really just sing. His acting is incredible. So the fact that he got the characters and what they were, who they were, you know, Skinner with the smirk and the kind of piece of candy in his hat, and Pearl, you know, defiant and eternally sort of optimistic. It was just terrific. And one of the things I'd also say is, you know, I hope one of the things that shines through the series is our friendship, you know, in the way that Rafa is one of my best friends. I consider him a brother, and, you know, we've stayed with each other, and, you know, we come visit each other even when we're not working on the series. And his storytelling also is a really big part. I feel like I have another writer on the book. He's a great writer in his own house, like when it comes to everything that you've seen him work on, from The Long Road to Hell, but also his own work and 8, all this stuff. And so, you know, we make so much of it up together. It's just a joy, you know.
Yeah, well, I think that's what you say. That's true. I mean, our friendship. That's what makes us, you know, collaborate so well. I believe. We were always talking not only about comics. Actually, we barely talk about comics. But yeah, I mean, we have this level of intimacy that allows us to just say what we think without filter, and that's what makes it good, I guess.
Yeah, and we also, like, I think we have similar sense of what the series needs to be about arc to arc. So for example, like the arc that we're about to do, and a lot of it, by the way, like, let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way too, which is, I think in some ways, you know, the series, we've taken a lot of breaks this week on, and that's been really hard because it is my favorite place to go. But I think what it really boils down to is, you know, sometimes they were private, personal reasons, stuff with family on my end and stuff like that, where there were just things going on with family that made it hard to juggle this series and Batman and that stuff. And what it really boiled down to is that Batman, I have like a committee of people that can help me with, because everybody has their books linked. So, you know, I can call James Tynion and American Vampire is such a personal place that I need my full creative energies to be able to do it. I can't sort of half-ass it, or I can't just sort of be like, hey, can I get on the phone and brainstorm this with you? Whereas Batman, it's equally important in terms of I give it 100%. I hope you can see all the time anything DC related. But there's just a lot of people you can talk to about it, because everybody knows Batman. Everybody can gauge whether this is the right thing for the character or not. You have a lot of sounding boards, but here it's like just me and Rafa, and I just never want to go into it unless I know I have something really special. And so now that we're freeing
we're
up,
a bit more protective about it.
we're very protective.
Even when I have like a guest artist, and I like them all, and you know, these things go through me, but it's something I don't really feel comfortable sometimes, because I wish I have done every single issue, which is impossible.
That's exactly, and I don't, like, for example, if we had used guest artists, we'd be like 4 trades, but I don't want that either. And that was one of the deals when we came back from our break, was that, you know, we were going to try and do as much as we could, just us, and just understand that it might hurt the sales or hurt consistency, but that in the end you'd have books that were by us that were really singular. So we'll do the anthologies and stuff where we invite other writers and artists in to do their takes, but when it comes to the main series, it's really us. And sometimes it's hard, because like right now, for example, we're jumping to the 70s for the next arc, which is going to be really intense. All these changes have happened to the characters. And the Tongue, you know, the organization that's sort of our version of the Devil's VMS, they have sort of gotten very close to the highest reaches of government, the presidency, and they have the VMS on the run and monsters all over the world. And they've been nurturing the beast, which is deep in the southwestern desert, and growing and creating more and more species, and it's ready to come out. And the Soviets are about to attack us, and it's really, really crazy. It's, you know, all kinds of strange pacts have been made between different monsters, and this blood of light that was introduced in the last arc has become a big factor. And it really wanted to be this kind of almost paranoid 1970s feel of this huge disillusionment once the hope of the 60s crashed. And there was this sense of, how do we overcome these problems that were modern problems that we're starting to see, I think, now become so scary to us, you know, the sense that all the economies are linked, and that, you know, government becomes something that is fallible. And, You know, all of these things that just feel like you feel so small in the face of these huge problems, and it's very hard to be brave, you know, and I think that has a big parallel nowadays. So anyway, sorry, that was a super corn maze thing I got lost in, but the point is that, the point I was trying to make was that essentially, there's a lot that happens between like where I left off with Rafa in the last volume and where we're picking up. And it would be so easy to be like, let me show you how they made a truce with the Carpathians. Okay, let me show you why that didn't work. Let me show you what happened to Gus and why he is where he is, because he's in a really scary place. Let me show you what happened with Skinner, because he makes a really strange choice and winds up in a very strange place when this begins. How did they raise Dracula? All this kind of stuff that's sort of all over. And each of those would be a really fun story, but again, it boils down to a choice where I think Rafa and I really feel more comfortable doing it together, and that means trying to do the real spine stuff and give you guys these intense arcs that really are almost like, you know, television seasons of the richest stuff. And all the peripheral stuff that sometimes in the first part of the half of the series, I think we sometimes got to do, spin-off type stuff. Just sort of saying, you know what, we can't do that right now. We're just doing the mega stuff and giving you the best we can, and that. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Well, I've been a fan of your stuff forever. Whenever you say things, I like to think I understand what's going on. Sometimes, you know, I'm a little hit. I got hit in the head too many times. Sometimes I don't know what's going on today. You know. The only other question I have is, how do you get to the point as a writer that you get the emotion? Like when I was rereading the series last night, which if you ask a question, you're going to get a trade. So if you line up by the mic, feel free. I only have 5, so the first 5.
Yep, just sign up by the, go up by the mics, guys.
Well, the emotion, what happens is what we try to do is figure out where the characters are going to be at this particular point. I think one of the dangers with a series like American Vampire is that it can become something that's like, hey, can we dress the characters up in 1950s gear? Hey, can we do something that's sort of fun, disco 70s? And they become like these dolls that you just sort of putting different clothes on. And if you try and make it about that era, more than about where the characters are, and often what happens is you realize that the characters are usually at a place in their life that's both reflective of that time period, or uses it at least as a context to talk about this time period. Because as much as American Vampire is about history, it really isn't. It's very much about sort of the ways in which we're heroic and monstrous, I think, now, you know, and the kinds of things that we wrestle with now. But it's seen through this kind of lens of history. So, for example, like with the new arc, this one that's going to start in the 70s, I'm thinking, well, where are all the characters? I want to put them at their most horrific points because we're gearing up for this kind of big final battle with the Beast. So it's sort of, well, where would the Grey Trader be? Where would Gus be? How do I put them in places that really push their arcs forward, where the hope and the optimism that Pearl had is now stringed within an inch of its life, and Skinner is missing and no one knows where he is, and you know, Travis is back in the series and all this stuff. Where would he be now? And it's the 70s and all of that stuff, and you try and figure out where they'd be emotionally that would be so interesting for you, and given all of their arcs. Skinner to me is the reverse Breaking Bad arc, where he starts as evil as possible and as bad as possible, and whether through fatigue or being worn down or, you know, I think the secret of the series to me is that he believes that he made Pearl because he sees darkness in her and he wanted a partner in crime, and she believes, or what she comes to realize, is he actually made her because he sees light in himself he doesn't want to admit exists. And she's actually sort of dragging him out into the light rather than him dragging her down into the shadows. So that sort of that sort of is the DNA of the sort of emotions of the series. But then it really comes down to just figuring out where they are. And then it comes down to, well, what are the greatest set pieces I can use? So like our short that we're doing takes place on a glacier in Alaska. There's humongo monsters and all kinds of fun stuff. It's really fun. I was like, I said it to him, and I'm like, it's like, you open it on, it's like blue, it's a glacier. And, you know, all of a sudden a helicopter lands and vampires get out. It's like, oh, I love this series so much. You know what I mean? But it's in the middle of the day, so they all have, like, you know, umbrellas and hoods and whatever. So it's so fun. But that's how I do it. I sort of, and then I before I do anything, I call Rafael and run him by, like, the basic idea of what I think the art could be about. And There are times that we have decided against some things and said, you know what, nah, it doesn't really work well enough, let's do something else. And like this time, for example, there was a whole arc I wanted to do in Egypt where Travis was looking for the very, with Gus, the last of this kind of blood of the first monster, or the first protector, the first vassal that might help them defeat this thing. And it was going to be very Indiana Jones. And it's really fun. I was going to do it set against the backdrop of sort of the peace talks in the Middle East in the 60s and stuff. But we just don't have time, you know what I mean? And it's a smaller arc, it doesn't, you know, so it might be a small beat here, but so the point is we do it as a team. I'll call them and say, this is what I'm thinking for the characters, what do you think? And sometimes it'll just be perfect right away in terms of where they are. And other times
there are always ideas that we like and actually wanted to do, but they are not as meaningful as, you know, they kind of run away off the path that the story should go sometimes. And it's not that we don't want to tell these stories, but I think we have to stick with the, you know, the right course of what we are doing and what does the story means, what we are trying to tell since the beginning, right?
Yeah, and the truth is, like, one of the funniest things about it is that we have plans for the series beyond the end of the series. So there's sort of two things, just to be totally spoilery, like there's sort of two ideas for it. And the first idea is we want to end this kind of moving up through time towards the present, because I'm not hugely interested in doing like the 90s, you know, or whatever, like boy bands or whatever.
I'd like to see the 90s.
He wants to do the 90s.
You know, those big suits, shoulders,
MC Hammer, whatever. Yeah, like
like
I mean,
Friends.
Yeah, right. Be like Friends. That'd be great. I think. No, I'm like, yeah, maybe. Right? Yeah, it'd be good. Maybe we'll do the 90s. I don't know. But I think I always planned on, from the very beginning, ending it at the bicentennial in 1976, and having it be 200 years since the founding of the country. Having it be this big battle between all the monsters we've introduced and sort of witches, or the thing that are the tongue, which are the sucklings of the beast, which are everywhere, everyone, you never know who's one of them. Then we kept talking, and I'm like, I never want to leave this series, I never want to leave these characters, I really don't. And yet, there's so many projects that both of us want to do. We want to do other creator-owned stuff together, and we want to do Batman or whatever together, and it makes it really hard. And so we were like, well, we got to get to the end, we got to do it. And so we're 100% obviously doing that. But then we were like, well, what if we do the series in the present and do it like a new iteration of the VMS, and who's left from the series and who's still around, and we do cases in the present all over the place, and we show things from history that, you know, affect the present, but it takes place now. And it's sort of the secret life of the secret monstrous kind of world behind our world in the present. So it's almost like the main series, American Vampire, would end with 1976 in this battle, and then soon after, sometime after, we'd pick the reins up again to do special stories that take place in the present. It's sort of a case file series, you know what I mean? And you'd see who's running the VMS now, and which characters are still around, and all that stuff.
And there's a lot of room to do it forever if we want.
Yeah,
And we do want.
Well, it's a great series, so if you
I'm not
guys
promising
50
though,
years,
you know?
yeah,
I'll
You know.
just leave this in the air. But yeah, we should get back to that eventually.
well, all my questions you guys have answered without me having to ask. So
Sure.
I'll let the fans ask their questions now, and I will be stepping over. Go right ahead, man.
Okay, so I'm an artist and I do, well, I'm trying to create my own comic book character. Since you're the artist, I want to ask you so I just need some tips on like getting like it to be more graphic, like to like make it like fighting scenes instead of just stick figures. So do you have any tips for me? Cause like you did in, I didn't mean to cut you off. But what you did in Batman, like you made them fight. Oh. No, I'm talking about the artist.
Well, the tip is, you know, you have just learned the basics of, it's a long path. I'm not lying to you, but you have to learn the basics of, you know, human anatomy, you have to learn composition, you have to learn storytelling. It takes a while, but pays back. I mean, it's a really interesting way to express yourself, and you know, that's it. I think that's the best tip I can give you, and also never give up. I mean, you once you're doing, you find someone who critique your art. That happens all the time. Sometimes it's like talented people and influent people, but you should never. I'm not saying that you shouldn't listen it. You should, but never, you know, never give up, right?
Okay.
That's what I would say.
The thing that's funny too is that art and writing is the same. It's like people think that it's a lot of the time that it's sort of natural aptitude and that kind of thing. You're just born with something to do it, and it's like a muse or inspiration, and it's really the opposite. I mean, I don't think I had a very high natural aptitude for writing. I wanted to be an artist, and it took me a long time to get even remotely good. I didn't get into any of the writing classes I applied to in college. I got rejected up and down until my senior year. And by the senior year, I was like, I went to this school because they have a writing program. Can I please give me a shot? And I got in, and I was just not, I wasn't that good, but I loved it, and it was what I wanted to do. And then when I left, I took classes over the summer at a school in Iowa, all summer long, to try and get better, and all of that. It's basically what it is it's essentially, and then I went to writing school, graduate school for it, you know, in New York. And what it really is it's a trade, you know, it's like devoting yourself to a certain trade that somewhere along the way, most of your friends are like, hey, I got a real job, and you're like, I'm a janitor at Disney World, but my real job is writing, and I'm getting better at it, you know?
And yeah, that's what you say. You have to devote yourself. Eventually, someone who say, well, you know what? It's Friday. Let's go out, and you have a page to do. Well, what would you do? You have to do your page, because that's a much bigger thing.
It really is like, there's not like a million, I believe this, like millions of amazing novels or art under beds that get sent in, and the evil system like rejects them, and there's so much talent. There is so much talent out there, but the problem is that those novels are just not finished. They're not polished to a degree that they need to be. And the hard work, it's like this Truman Capote quote this teacher told me when I was starting. It was like, editing isn't cleaning up after the party, it is the party. And that whole sense of like going back and sitting there when it's not fun and you're not inspired, and drawing hands over and over and over. Or drawing, you know, for composition over and over and over. Same thing, writing, you know, when you just don't feel like it, when it's just, you're just not up, you just know what you're gonna write is terrible that day, but you just do it anyway, because that's your job, you know?
Basically, you suffer, but pays back.
I love that we're telling this to kids.
Here's the one thing.
It will be horrible.
Yeah, sorry, it's gonna break your heart, but it's okay. You survive.
Hey, Caleb.
Come on up here, man.
Okay.
I don't bite. But the one thing I can tell you, and the one thing you will learn, is 10,000 hours will help you get better. That's what they tell you. Put 10,000 hours in, you'll become a master at anything.
Is this book scary?
A little bit.
A little bit,
I'll
a
read
little
it with
bit,
you. I'll read it with
a little bit.
It's also signed by Rafael.
I don't want to get shot, but Batman was phenomenal, what you wrote. And I know I read an article on the Rebirth, you went on a trip, and that's how you got the idea for All Star.
Yeah.
Talk about Batman.
No, it's okay.
Have you used any of your life experiences for the vampire thing? Like,
Oh,
when
sure.
You talked about like rejection and how you battled through it. Thank God you did, because we got some of the best Batman I've ever read in my life.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah,
I never read the vampire thing, but
Oh,
I
it's
wonder
okay.
where a good point was stopped, and I guess I'm getting a free trade, so.
Yeah. No. Honestly, I love that Batman draws people into American Vampire and vice versa. I mean, my belief, and I think this is true of Rafa too, I mean, I think when you're a really dedicated artist or writer, hopefully, you will see the same, not just style, but you'll see the same sensibility in all the different things that you write or draw. So when I see Rafa do stuff that's on other series, like Batgirl, for example, right now, it's different than American Vampire. It has a poppier feel. and yet I still see the enthusiasm and the joy and the kind of storytelling, the moments that he emphasizes that make his art really special in that. When I do Batman, or when I do American Vampire, it's very emotional. So like the last arc, the last thing we did was, just if anyone hasn't read it yet, it basically imagines that, okay, right now it's like the VMS, which is the series, the group that hunts monsters in our world, like our secret service that goes around hunting all kinds of vampires and werewolves and anything that exists. They're sort of desperate to stop this ancient evil from growing underneath the desert in America near Las Vegas. It's this beast that was put down there in the Old West times, and it's growing, and it's responsible for the myth of hell because it burrows and burrows and burrows, and it pulls people down and turns them into monsters, and nobody will admit it's down there, and you can't bomb it, and so on. And so what they need to do is they need to go in and extract the one thing they think will kill it from Area 51, and meanwhile they send another team of monsters into space in an early 1962 Gemini rocket to try and stop this Russian satellite from seeing that they're doing this, because the Russians will devastate us with nuclear bombs if they see us, if they realize that this thing is under the ground here, because they've dealt with it in the past. So it's just, sounds insane, right? But what the arc is really about, it's largely about when you started to see sort of things feel not so hopeful with the things that were in the news in particular at the time about police shootings, and also about the coming election, and a lot of things that just felt, regardless of your politics, felt like, well, right now problems seem systemic and really big and really hard to deal with. There's no simple answer for many of these things. And I thought, well, we're in the 60s, it must have felt like a time of radical change, when people didn't know if things would go well or poorly. Are all these kind of civil rights fights going to go well, or are things going to regress? And what side of history are you on, and so on. And so it becomes very much about trying to put yourself into every arc, whether it's Batman, and Batman has all kinds of stuff for me, like Death of the Family is largely when
That was phenomenal.
Thanks. That was like we were pregnant with our second kid, and that was when I was like, I'm going to be a terrible father, I'm sure, this time around, and I don't know if I'm going to be any good with another kid. And I was like, well, Batman seems to have kids, and the Joker, I wonder if he feels this way. And then I was like, well, the Joker must be like, I heard you just say you don't want a family. Well, I'll just kill all of them, and then we'll go back to being us. And I was like, oh, there you go. And so the point I'm trying to make in my long, circuitous way is that the same with Rafa with his art. You can see emotionally what I'm thinking about or going through, I hope, or the things that are keeping me up at night for my kids. Whether you're writing Batman or you're writing American Vampire, and my favorite writers and artists, I think, in comics, are capable of doing wildly different things, like Jason Aaron or Tom King, or they can do very, very different books, and yet I can still read them and recognize their interests and their passions, even though one book might be like huge and bombastic in action and summer blockbuster, and the other might be really focused and political and dark. So that's my hope, is that whether you read American Vampire or Batman, or you look at American Vampire or Batgirl, or any of the great work Rafael's done, you can see a sort of singularity in our work.
Thank you.
Come on up, man. Young man, you can ask your question.
Hi,
Very authentic.
I have a question for Scott Snyder. What's your favorite Batman villain?
Well, my favorite villain is the Joker.
That's not him.
Well, because I feel like he's sort of, and Skinner has a lot of modeling after the Joker in certain ways, where I think the scariest characters are the ones that see what you're afraid of, and then sort of bring those things to life, and he's that character. He says, well, I know what you're afraid is true. Well, I'm going to show you that it is true about the world or yourself, and I'll laugh at you, when you see that it is.
The Court of Owls was amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, Rafa helped me with some of that too.
Come on up, kiddo.
Hey guys. So yeah, basically, I just wanted to say that the thing that I like most about American Vampire, and you were talking about it earlier, is the, like how Skinner is becoming less and less evil as time is going on. But at the very beginning, I still have that impression, and I like the gray aspect of like between the good and evil, because like even Pearl, who I see as like the really good character, you know, you can see that she's getting like a little corrupted as time is going on and everything, to some degree. But I guess the biggest thing that threw me off was sort of like when she and Skinner are doing a mission.
I know what you're gonna say.
Yeah, and they have
together.
Yeah. Now, because you're talking about like the partner in crime aspect, was that something that you were like building up towards for like a long time, or something that you and Raph collaborated in that sense, like we should just have this happen, or was it just sort of like, you know, like it was? I would say it was like a last minute decision, but it was. I mean, I guess because it just threw me off a lot. But
Really,
I mean,
yeah, that was the thing that I think hurt people the most in the whole series was. I got a lot of emails about that, but it was something that we had been, it's sort of foreshadowed even in very early issues where, even in the one that I did that was the Wild West one, which I really love, it was like issue, where you learn that Skinner in the past had a romance with somebody who was similar to Pearl, and who he's trying to make, the thing is Skinner wants a partner in crime. He wants her to come and be this wild, sort of Bonnie and Clyde figure. And what she wants is, she is trying desperately to say, you made me for a reason, I'm trying to make the world better, and you could help me, so come this way. And I think they have a deep connection, and I think in some ways, at that particular moment, what happened was she just was lost. She just was lost, and he was lost too. And I think they found a connection that wasn't sort of betraying Henry or evil or something like that. It was more like they're both two just very lost people at that he's trapped and doesn't know how to get out of this box, and she's feeling like everything she built with Henry is just going away. And so it's almost like a confirmation that no matter what happens, they'll find each other somehow again, whether they're enemies or friends. So yeah, it was definitely a really hard thing to write, and but I think it feels true. I think it's probably the thing that she's most upset about, and him.
Yeah. No, I was saying I just love the fact that you were saying like the Wild West is probably my favorite Skinner arc, because it just when you see the grays of those characters, I think it's always been there, but it's getting more popular now, especially with stuff like Game of Thrones, is that when you're a kid, you always want to believe in good and evil, but then you have an evil character and you see them doing good things, and that's what I've always loved about Skinner, is that you're not always sure what he's going to do. And I've always liked that unpredictability. And I want to say too, to Raph, that I enjoy the art with that particular scene between Pearl and Skinner. It's been a while since I've read it, but there's so many ways that you could have drawn it, and it seems both like forceful, but yet it's happening at the same time. I guess is the best way to put it. I don't know, but I liked the aspect of looking at it, and and it worked for me in that sense.
And he designs all that. By the way, like I write differently for every artist. Jock likes really intense paneling, and then he'll stray from it a lot, which is great. But Rafa, I know with many scenes I can be like pages 5 to 10. Here's the dialogue, and this is the feeling of the scene, and he choreographs that stuff better than I ever could. So. And
I just want to say I was here yesterday when you were with Greg, and I love the fact that you make such strong friendships and bonds. And more than anything, you want the stories to reflect as you said, your friendship more than anything. And I think that's kind of beautiful.
Well, thanks. I mean it like the thing that's so great about comics, in my opinion, and coming from prose, which was lonely, is the collaborative aspect. And when you have somebody that you're making something out of scratch together, it's yours and you own it together. And there's a sense of partnership there that's very deep. You're vulnerable together. You're both like putting something out into the world that means something to you, and you're both going to be judged on it, and you're saying something, and all of that stuff is really hard. And I think you try and find partners who you just see eye to eye with, and that's why I feel like this. I love coming to this con. It's Sean Murphy, him, Greg. Like we're all genuine friends outside of it. Everybody's been to each other's house.
Eventually, you also get this sensation of family. I mean, it becomes part of your family of people you love. I mean, it's maybe not like a blood family, but it's sometimes even stronger.
Yeah, my kids call him Uncle Rafa, and you know, like they do. And like the funny thing too, like my parents love him. Do you remember the first time he came to New York? Like
I went to his parents' house.
by mistake. He was supposed to. I was gonna stay with my parents, and he was gonna stay with my buddy. And he went to my parents' house, and I was like, oh my God, where's Rafael? He's lost. He's like dead somewhere in the city. And then my parents at like 10 at night call me, and they're like, oh, your artist friend is over here. He's so nice. And I'm like, wait, what? And then they were like, well, we can't put him out on the street. He's gonna stay with us. And I'm like, he makes money than me. Like he's richer than me. Like I'm not gonna put him out on the street. Like what do you mean? Like, and they liked having him stay better than me. And then when he left, he gave him a page from American Vampire. And it's awesome. It's this page where Pearl is like ripping out Hattie's guts, and they put it up in their kitchen.
They pick it up.
They put it up.
Their choice.
Yeah, and they put it up in their kitchen, and it was like next to a watercolor of like flowers and whatever, and like it's like this disemboweling monster thing. It's awesome. It was so funny, dude. They love you. It's family. We're all, you know. He's been there for the birth of my like. I didn't have a second kid, you know, and all that. It's like we're all family.
Yeah.
And you're a part of that too. I would just say, like, the fact that American Vampire got rejected like for a year. Like, it was my first thing. You know, you guys.
It's my first thing in a way. Yeah.
You guys really came with us on the whole journey with this thing, and it's been going. We started working on it in 2009, so you know, it is a lot of our lives. Like I had, you know. I don't even think Jack was what, 1 or something? I don't know.
Jack was newborn.
Newborn. Now he's 9. You know, and Emmett wasn't born, and you know, you didn't know Deb, all that stuff. Like, just totally different lives. Crazy.
All right, this is gonna be the last question. We're running out of time here. Just ask your question, sir.
I'll make it quick. I just want to know because I love how you do put your life and your experiences and everything into your artwork and whatever's going on in your life at that time. Is there 1 or 2 particular characters that you relate to in American Vampire that you kind of draw from your inspiration from?
That's a great question. They're all partly, you know, they all have pieces of us in them. I have favorites. I love Travis deeply because he's crazy. He's all my Elvis love and obsession. I'm a big Elvis fan. I have Elvis tattoos and all that stuff. But I think for me, my Pearl and Felicia and Skinner are always sort of, you know, sort of the most emotional vessels for the stuff that I feel. And Pearl is probably the character for me that I feel the closest to because she, even though I think in some ways she is always optimistic, she's kind of my Batman in the series where no matter what happens to her, she's just going to get up and be like, I will figure a way out of this. And you know, Felicia on the other hand is just a military. She's sort of like, there's only war all the time. And Pearl's the one that's like, you gotta remember what you're fighting for. And that it's not about the war, it's about the purpose of it. And Skinner is much more like burn, like you try and put me in a box, I'll burn it down. And you know, there's that's when you go in and you're like, someone's like, you'll never be able to write Batman. Batman is 75 years old, no one can come up with anything new. And you're like, that's the box. And you're like, I'm Skinner, you know what I mean? You're like, so they all really have pieces of you in them, but Pearl is also the one that saved the series. Like when I first pitched it, if you remember, it got rejected because I had focused a lot on Skinner in the pitch, and Pearl was in it, but I was going to start with it. Basically, it wasn't going to be a 2-part book. It was going to be the Skinner.
It was supposed to be just a Western.
It was going to start in the West, and then the second arc was going to introduce Pearl. So a lot of the pitch was about Skinner, and Will Dennis was like, I love this, but I can't do it. Westerns don't sell. And he's like, what's going to be on the cover? Like a cowboy hat with fangs? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And they're like, no, it doesn't. So then I went back and I rewrote the pitch, and I'm like, I don't think you get it, and like, it's my fault, let me put it back in. And I really focused on Pearl, and then a few months later, they approved it. And so Pearl also is my favorite character because my entire career in comics is like predicated on her awesomeness. So she's probably my favorite.
I would say Pearl too. I mean, I think she's basically she wants to make good with the tools she have. That's it. And I think in a way I'm like that. She understands that she's not perfect, but she's trying hard. But she has her flaws, and that's, I mean, it's a very human, it's a very human character, I think, and that's how we can relate with her. I mean, it's easy to see yourself in Pearl.
Thank you very much.
I definitely do love other characters like Travis.
Travis is
Yeah,
fun.
he's probably my favorite character, but the one I relate more is definitely Pearl.
He comes back next arc in a big way. He's really fun.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Rafael. American Life Join in, bring from together to their table. I'll try some of the things, please.
Scott and Greg Capullo will be signing as soon as we get downstairs, so please try not to crowd them, because Greg's waiting for Scott right now. And Rafa will be at his table to sign as well.